Hey guys, welcome back to You Sure Talk a Lot. I'm your host, Ryan. Sunday morning, no, it's Saturday morning. God, I'm all confused. I'm doing a 3-day weekend this weekend. Today is Saturday morning. It's only about 7 a.m. You know, on my day job, I get up my alarm goes off at 5:20 ish. I get up maybe 5:45 and start my day. And after doing that for months on end, it doesn't matter what, the day of the week is. My body clock says, whoa, sorry, I just bumped it. My body clock says it's time to get up. And when that happens, you just got to get up. So I'm enjoying some coffee in a mug that matches my shirt. Look at that, camouflaged. While uploading the video part 2 of the Super Jumbo Weekend to my other channel. But I thought I wanted to do a quick video, and the topic today is just not facing reality. We all do it. But I think I mentioned in some videos, a couple videos back, I've been watching videos on YouTube about romance scammers. In the psychology, I'm just still blown away at how people can be in such self-denial, not even necessarily denial about the fact that the person they're communicating with is a romance scammer, just self-denial in general. I see it in so many ways. There was one case where a woman, her husband had left her back in the 90s for a friend, a younger woman who was also her friend, and they got married. Well, the woman in the video obviously got divorced since her husband left her, but the husband then married her friend and had been married for like 20 years, and that was back in the early 90s. And she had never remarried. And then she found a romance scammer, and she made some comments about he doesn't insult me or degrade me. And that was pretty much her standard. So I guess her ex-husband did degrade her and insult her. So she was kind of beat down psychologically in that sense. And when she found somebody who would accept her for her, she, ruined her life, buying into the scam. There was another woman whose husband had died, and she gave a romance scammer over $1 million before she came to grip. Her only $1 million. She was flat broke, literally flat broke. But she at least, that just amazes me as someone can go to that level. But she at least said, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to get back to what's important to me, which for her was like painting and creativity. She'd gotten away from it for decades, and she's like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being creative and doing what I want to do, because the previous life really wasn't working for me, and the romance scammer thing was a wake-up call. So she's at least, pardon me, facing reality now. And I've been watching some other things on the news, and it amazes me how people just won't face reality. And if you're not willing to face reality, reality can't change. Like, the more you resist it, the more it persists, right? So even people caught up in the romance game, if they would just come to grips and say, yeah, I was stupid. Yes, I ignored the warning signs. And yes, I have some deep-seated insecurities that person preyed on that I need to resolve, or I'm going to become a victim again. Many of these romance scammers, that happens multiple times because they don't resolve the underlying issues, and it can't be resolved unless they become very honest with themselves, right? So it's just amazing. I was watching another news clip last night that was related to the whole, Trump trials, and it was around Peter Navarro trying to invoke executive privilege, and he couldn't. Even the judge threw out that defense and said no, because the executive in this case wouldn't back him up on it. And Ari Melber, the broadcaster, the journalist who was interviewing him, said, yes, executive privilege does exist, just not for you, because Trump doesn't have your back. And he shook his head and said, no, that's not the case. And he launched into his defense. I'm not going to go into the details of that case, but the physical reaction of hearing, the truth from Ari, the way he sort of squinched his eyes and said, no, that's not it. He's in denial. You can't have executive privilege if the executive who invokes that privilege refuses to say executive privilege applies here. And that was the case. So he's in denial of reality. So I have to ask myself, what reality am I denying for myself that I really ought to? Getting older is one. I see it in the camera. I am facing my own aging. Another is just being here in general on this property, having lived all over the country and been in relationships most of the time. By buying property here in Bisbee, Arizona that's rural and living off grid, you know, I'm committed to the fact that there's a smaller social pool. There's a construct here that is driven by the physical constraints of the location of the land and the sheer number of people around. And when I made a decision to buy this land, I sort of made a decision to be solo. That's not to say I don't have relationships and that I don't value the people in my life, but I'm creating geographical separation between myself and the people in my life. You know, my mom and my sister are down in Costa Rica. My son is out in California. My dad has passed. That just leaves me here in the middle of nowhere. And that's a reality. And I had to be willing to face that reality that I could be living out my remaining days as a fairly solo, alone person. But as we know, alone and lonely are two different things, right? They're not synonymous. I can be alone without being lonely, and you can be lonely as shit while being surrounded by people. So that's a reality that I had to face. Another one is with going back to the aging thing, is how it affects my career. I used to get most jobs that I seriously applied for. When I was in my 20s, 30s, and early 40s, I would get most jobs that I was a match to because, you know, I can relate to people and I can speak and, you know, articulate my benefits and my strengths and my skills and what I'm bringing to the table. And my salary expectations for the most part are high but reasonable. So I'd get most jobs that I went after. But that started to shift in my mid-40s. And now in my early 50s, I had a string of several job opportunities in a row that they didn't pick me. It's my fault. But I have to say, ageism in general, I think is a thing. I didn't used to believe that, but I kind of have seen. Now that could be coupled with my own inner self-doubts as I age, maybe. But, you know, I'm in a technical field, so my knowledge and skills only build. It's not like aging is a negative thing. And in fact, life maturity in the field that I'm in, which is cybersecurity, life maturity is a benefit because you have to make decisions. And the more career experience you have, the stronger, better, more wise decisions you're probably going to make. But the point is, I have to face the reality that I don't necessarily get every job I go for, and that impacts whether or not I do pursue other job opportunities or stay at my current role, which I do really like. But I used to job hop every 2-3 years, and I've been at my current employer officially 5 years, but unofficially 6, because I was a contractor for a year when I first started. So that's a reality that I have to face. The decline in my muscles and physically, you know, I'm having to counteract that. My health isn't as, you know, there's just all kinds of things related to aging that I think it's important to face reality. And going back to the romance scammers, a lot of the people who are victims of the romance scammers, they're not willing to face reality that they're not the spring kitten that they used to be. In our minds, we have a vision of what we look like and how others perceive us, and it's usually wrong. But they don't question it. Like if they're in their mid-60s and a 40-something-year-old, really handsome person, you know, man reaches out to an older woman like that, they have to realize that there is an attractiveness mismatch. Now, I know that happens on occasion, but by and large, people, you know, gravitate towards people as equally as attractive as them, or with the same, you know, overall attractiveness level, I guess. And they're not facing reality that there's a massive mismatch there, which should be a huge red flag. But for them, it's not because they're in denial. So what are you in denial about? And it's not that living in denial about things or being unwilling to face reality, it's not the end of the world. A person can do it, depending on the topic and what the subject matter is, you know, for a really long time with no negative repercussions. But in some areas of our life, the repercussions of not facing it can be brutal. Hey, it's Future Ryan, the one editing this video. You know, as I was listening to myself in the editing process, a concept or a quote that relates to this concept I just heard the other day by Fani Willis, the district attorney or state attorney general? No, district attorney in Fulton County, who's prosecuting Trump for his interference in the Georgia election. She has a statement that's been in the news cycle last couple days that says, deal with reality or reality's going to deal with you. And man, I love that phrase. That captures it so perfectly. Reality is going to deal with you if you don't face up to reality. For all of us, that is a universal truth. So what is the point? What is the point of not facing reality? Now, there's some things like I can go into denial about for the short term. Like, I know if I open this closet door, it's going to be chaos and I don't have time to clean the closet right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the door closed and I'll come back around to it in the back of my mind. It's on my to-do list, right? That's not denial of reality, right? It's just delaying the inevitable task that you just don't have time for right now. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about staring truth in the face. If you're not willing to do it, then life's going to deal with you. It's going to bring a situation, a circumstance, something to your attention that forces you to deal with it. And there's another concept that goes right hand in hand with this from Abraham Hicks. The quote is, don't worry, it'll get bigger. I've shared this with a lot of people in my life. It basically says if you ignore a symptom, if you ignore a circumstance, a feeling, all of these things, they are signs of what's going on in your life and in you energetically. And if you ignore it and don't take the opportunity to align with the situation or fix your vibration or come to peace with whatever it is, if you're not willing to do that, it's okay. You can temporarily delay dealing with the reality, but it's going to get bigger. Things will come back around in cycles and manifest themselves in different ways until it gets your attention, until you deal with it. I'm going to do a whole nother video because I love that concept of don't worry, it'll get bigger. You can ignore that nagging voice. You can suppress your feelings. You can ignore your intuition. You can ignore your type 2 diabetes and keep chugging down the sodas. You can, fall victim to a romance scammer that's obviously not a real person. You can ignore all that. Don't worry. Your problem is going to get bigger, but that's the universe helping you bring circumstances to your experience so that you can get past them. You can deal with whatever is the underlying root cause and get past it once for all. And if you're not willing to do it right now, don't worry, it'll get bigger. You got to face reality or reality is going to deal with you. The 3 different ways of saying that is, just dovetail perfectly. I really like that. My own example, back when I was in real estate, back in 2005, 6, 7, I was flipping houses. And while I was making money and each house would, give me $20,000 to $40,000 in profit, I was doing them at a pace and spending money at a pace where the income versus the expenses was not great. I was getting by, and we got by. At the time I was married and Ryder was little. Got by for several years. But I wasn't facing the reality that my bank account in general over that long term was not growing. It was dwindling bit by bit. And then when the market shifted and, I couldn't sell houses and equity that I thought I had in houses became phantom equity and vanished. That thing about bankruptcy, how does it happen? They say slowly at first, then suddenly all at once. So true. So true. What I was ignoring was the slowly part. If I stepped back and looked at my balance sheet and said, objectively, my balance sheet is dwindling, something needs to change because the business model is not sustainable. Now, had the market not turned, that business market might have sustained itself for another 3 or 4 years. But at some point, if I didn't either increase my volume or make more profit or, or something, the business wouldn't have worked out. But I was young and dumb and didn't face that reality. There's a phrase about it's not how much money you make, it's about how much you keep. That's another reality that I wasn't willing to face. I always thought, in the future I would make more money and be able to repay any debts, and I could consume now and sacrifice the future by essentially going into debt. But there's a point at which your income for most people does actually peak. Usually in your late 40s, and then from there it tends to go down. So that's a potential reality a lot of people have to face. With physical health, your bad habits like drinking, smoking, etc. eventually catches up to you. Now, there was a point in my teen years and early 20s where I was a heavy smoker when I was in the Navy. And my excuse was that I was young and I could get away with it. My body could handle it. But around age 22, I realized, 21 or 22, I was willing to face reality enough to say, you know what, I'm not that young anymore. My body's not going to be able to handle this heavy cigarette smoking for very long. So I quit, and it was really difficult. But it was the willingness to face that reality that my excuse had passed. I couldn't keep relying on that same excuse anymore. And so I did what I needed to do. And in general, that is my approach. I do try to face reality as much as I possibly can, because denial of reality keeps you stuck in that reality. And if you don't like what's going on in your life, and you want to change it, you have to start by facing reality. And that's difficult. It can be painful. People are in denial, especially about death. They're not only their own, but the passing of their own parents and siblings and cousins and all that. I know some of you watching have faced that, where like you're the last surviving member of your entire clan, and that's got to be so brutally challenging and difficult. And I know there'll be a day where that could be me, you know. Sorry, Mom, but you're going to pass. And Lane, if you're watching, you're going to pass. You know, at some point, I will be the last of my clan. Now, my son hopefully will outlive me by a good 50 years, but yeah, that's a reality we all face. And it amazes me how many people are absolutely devastated and angry by the passing of parents and loved ones. But my battery died right in the middle of all that. So what I was saying was, everybody dies, and it's just amazing to me how many people live their lives not... See, I rehearse mentally. I emotionally try to prepare myself for the passing of loved ones. And just think, okay, when that happens, how am I going to feel about it? How am I going to approach it? And my approach generally is to think, well, that sucks. I'm going to miss them. But in my belief system, I'm going to see that person again on the other side, so to speak, right? And that the separation is really an illusion. And it's just a matter of being patient until you see them again and all of that. So it's just kind of a temporary thing. And so that's my coping mechanism. And granted, I don't know that that's what happens in the afterlife, but that's my belief. And so that's how I cope with it. But some people don't even go to that level. They don't psychologically prepare for eventualities, and not just death, everything. Anything that is likely to happen, we should prepare ourselves for it. So I don't know. I guess that's just my rant for today. While dealing with reality and is painful and it sucks and it can bring up unpleasant feelings, that whole ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure thing really applies here, because if you don't do it, the pain that you're going to feel down the line is so much more significant. So an ounce of reality beats a pound of denial. It's just the way it is. Maybe I'm saying that in a funny way, but I think you get the point. So anyway, I'm going to finish my coffee. I'm going to upload a video to my other channel, to my All Mine Ranch channel, and then I'm going to go outside and build. It looks to be a hot but lovely day, hopefully.